Once upon a time, in a land plagued by, well, plagues, there existed a unique breed of individuals doctors. Now, these were not your average folks who got queasy at the sight of blood. No, these were brave souls who faced the wrath of diseases head on, armed only with their wit and a questionable amount of leeches. Our story begins with a young lad named Henry. Henry wasn't your typical hero material. He preferred books to battles and potions to parties, but destiny had other plans for him. As the plague swept through the land like a tornado through a haystack, Henry found himself at a crossroads. Should he flee like the sensible villagers or stand his ground like a hero from those epic tales? Enter Dr. Smith, the village physician, or as Henry liked to call him, the plague slayer extraordinaire. Dr. Smith was a man of few words but many bandages. He'd seen it all, from boils the size of apples to sneezes that could launch 1,000 ships. Yet, amidst the chaos and contagion, there was a glimmer of something noble in his eyes, a sense of duty and responsibility that could rival even the mightiest knights of yore. "Why do you do it, Doctor Smith?" Henry asked one day, his voice trembling like a leaf in the autumn breeze. Dr. Smith paused, his scalpel poised mid-air as if pondering the mysteries of the universe. "Because someone has to," he finally replied, his voice as steady as a surgeon's hand. "Because in times of darkness, it is our duty to be the light." And so Henry made his decision. With a newfound sense of purpose burning in his heart, or perhaps just heartburn from the questionable tavern stew, he vowed to follow in Dr. Smith's footsteps. For he realized that being a doctor wasn't just about curing diseases or collecting fancy titles. It was about shouldering the weight of responsibility, even when the world seemed to be crumbling around you. And thus Henry embarked on his journey, armed with nothing but a stethoscope and a dream. Little did he know that his greatest adventure was just beginning, filled with more drama, danger, and digestive issues than he could ever have imagined. So, the next time you find yourself faced with a daunting task or a particularly stubborn case of the sniffles, remember the tale of Henry and Dr. Smith. Remember that sometimes the greatest heroes are not the ones with capes or swords, but those who heed the call of duty and responsibility, even in the face of overwhelming odds. And who knows? You might just discover that the bravest journeys begin with a single step, and perhaps a healthy dose of hand sanitizer. In the bustling village of Germville, yes, they were not very creative with names, there lived a doctor named Dr. Clara. Now, Dr. Clara wasn't your typical physician. She had a knack for turning even the gloomiest of diagnoses into a game of medical charades. But when the plague hit Germville like an overenthusiastic party crasher, Dr. Clara knew it was time to put her skills to the test. Armed with her trusty stethoscope and a rather questionable sense of humor, Dr. Clara waded through a sea of sniffles and sneezes, determined to make a difference in the lives of her patients. "Laughter is the best medicine," she'd quip, much to the confusion of her feverish audience. But amidst the chaos and contagion, Dr. Clara saw something remarkable: hope. She saw it in the eyes of a child with a fever, clinging to her teddy bear like a lifeline. She saw it in the weary smiles of parents, grateful for even a moment of respite from their worries. And she saw it in herself, as she realized that even in the darkest of times, there was still light to be found. "Why do you do it, Doctor Clara?" a curious villager asked one day, his voice muffled by a particularly dramatic coughing fit. Dr. Clara flashed him a mischievous grin, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Because someone has to bring a little sunshine to this plague party," she replied, her laughter echoing through the makeshift clinic. And so Dr. Clara continued her crusade against the plague, armed with nothing but her wit and a healthy dose of optimism. For she knew that even in the midst of despair, there was always an opportunity to make a difference, one joke at a time. And as the villagers of Germville slowly but surely began to recover, Dr. Clara realized that the greatest reward wasn't fame or fortune, but the knowledge that she had brought a little bit of joy to those who needed it most. And who knows? You might just discover that laughter truly is the best medicine, along with a healthy dose of hand sanitizer, of course. In the quaint town of Ailmentville, they really needed a better naming committee. Dr. Eugene was the resident brainiac. With a mind sharper than a scalpel and a wit quicker than a sneeze, he thrived on the intellectual challenges that came with being a doctor, especially during plagues. When the plague descended upon Ailmentville like a swarm of particularly persistent mosquitoes, Dr. Eugene saw it as an opportunity to flex his mental muscles. "Ah, a puzzle to solve," he exclaimed, rubbing his hands together with glee and maybe a little too much hand sanitizer. Armed with his trusty medical textbooks and a questionable amount of caffeine, Dr. Eugene delved into the depths of plague research, determined to uncover the secrets of this mysterious illness. He pored over ancient manuscripts, deciphered cryptic medical codes, and even conducted his own experiments, much to the dismay of his lab assistant, who was still recovering from the last explosion. "Why do you do it, doctor?" "Eugene?" his assistant asked one day, eyeing the bubbling beakers with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Dr. Eugene grinned, his eyes sparkling with the thrill of discovery. "Because someone has to outsmart this pesky plague," he replied, adjusting his glasses with an air of scholarly superiority. And so Dr. Eugene continued his quest for knowledge, unraveling the mysteries of the plague one hypothesis at a time. For he knew that even in the midst of chaos and confusion, there was always an intellectual challenge waiting to be conquered. And as the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, Dr. Eugene emerged victorious, armed with a newfound understanding of the plague and a few less brain cells, thanks to those aforementioned explosions. So, dear reader, the next time life throws a curveball your way, remember the tale of Dr. Eugene. Remember that even in the darkest of times, there is always an opportunity for intellectual growth and discovery. And who knows, you might just discover that the greatest challenges often lead to the greatest rewards. And maybe a Nobel Prize or two if you're lucky. In the bustling village of Sniffelberg, seriously, who comes up with these names? Dr. Beatrice was known for her unshakable resolve and her uncanny ability to bounce back from even the most disastrous of medical mishaps. When the plague descended upon Sniffelberg, like a particularly persistent case of the hiccups, Dr. Beatrice found herself facing a challenge unlike any other. Armed with her trusty medical bag and a healthy dose of determination, she dove headfirst into the chaos, ready to confront whatever obstacles came her way. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, Dr. Beatrice found herself tested in ways she had never imagined. She battled exhaustion, frustration, and more than a few questionable medical diagnoses. Note to self, bubonic plague does not respond well to chicken soup. "Why do you do it, doctor?" "Beatrice," her assistant asked one day, eyeing her warily as she downed her 10th cup of coffee. Dr. Beatrice flashed him a weary smile, her eyes reflecting the wear and tear of countless sleepless nights. "Because someone has to keep fighting, even when the odds are stacked against us," she replied, her voice tinged with determination. And so Dr. Beatrice soldiered on, her spirit unbroken, despite the countless setbacks and obstacles that stood in her way. For she knew that even in the darkest of times, there was always an opportunity for personal growth and resilience. And as the villagers of Sniffelberg slowly but surely began to recover, Dr. Beatrice emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. She had faced the storm head-on and emerged victorious, armed with a newfound sense of purpose and a few extra wrinkles, courtesy of those aforementioned sleepless nights. In the quaint hamlet of Achewington, seriously, who's in charge of these names? Dr. Amelia was known for her unwavering commitment to treating patients with compassion and kindness, regardless of their social status or circumstances. When the plague descended upon Achewington like a particularly aggressive case of the hiccups, Dr. Amelia sprang into action, armed with her trusty medical bag and a heart as big as the village square. She treated each patient with the same level of care and consideration, whether they were a nobleman or a lowly peasant, or somewhere in between. But amidst the chaos and contagion, Dr. Amelia saw something remarkable: humanity. She saw it in the tearful eyes of a mother cradling her sick child, in the trembling hands of an elderly man seeking comfort in the midst of despair. And she saw it in herself as she realized that even in the darkest of times, there was still hope to be found. "Why do you do it, doctor?" "Amelia?" a curious villager asked one day, his voice filled with wonder. Dr. Amelia smiled, her eyes shining with the warmth of 1,000 suns. "Because someone has to be a beacon of hope in the darkness," she replied, her voice as gentle as a summer breeze. And so, Dr. Amelia continued her tireless crusade against the plague, treating each patient with the same level of care and compassion as the last. For she knew that even in the midst of suffering and sorrow, there was always an opportunity to show kindness and humanity. And as the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, Dr. Amelia's compassion and kindness spread like wildfire through the village of Achewington. She had touched the lives of countless individuals, leaving behind a legacy of love and compassion that would endure for generations to come. So, dear reader, the next time life throws a curveball your way, remember the tale of Dr. Amelia. Remember that even in the darkest of times, there is always an opportunity to show kindness and humanity. And who knows? You might just discover that the greatest rewards come not from wealth or fame, but from the simple act of making a difference in someone else's life. If you know more interesting stories, I'm waiting for you in the comments. Subscribe to the channel and let me know if you want the next part. Bye!